Today we're going to look at negative comparisons. I'm going to use a lot of X's and Y's because I think this makes it simpler and clearer to understand. To break up these correlative conjunctions, for example, into X's and Y's, it helps us to see things in their simplest forms. Now, firstly, I want to deal with something which in the grammar books it says it's correct, and that's Murphy. In the Murphy grammar book it says this is correct, and in Cambridge and in Oxford it certainly says it's correct. But I don't really like this. I still claim that it's wrong. I still stick by my claims, and it's when we say something like this: he is not so tall as I am. I don't like it. I don't like not so tall as I am. I don't like it when we compare X and Y with an adjective in the middle. If it's a positive sentence, it must be as. If we get rid of the not, it must be he is as tall as I am. We cannot say he is so tall as I am, and that's why I don't like it. It's one of the main reasons I don't like it. However, I think that we can use so and as in many other constructions which are actually very different from this one, and perhaps this is part of the confusion. I'm not sure, but these sentences, which I hope to show you, are very different from this one. In this, they actually it sounds really nice. It sounds really good. It's good grammar in all three of these sentences to have a so and an as, but involved in some kind of comparison. However, these comparisons are different. I think that Cambridge and Oxford and Murphy, I think they're defending old usage of this, and actually in modern times I don't think we do use it like this, and I'm teaching foreign students, and I believe when they use that one they sound very foreign. So if you want to sound English, I advise you to not use that particular construction, but to use not as adjective as. Okay, let's continue then on to some of these forms. Not so much to X as to Y. Now, this expression, it involves the expression so as to, which is a very important expression, which just means in order to. Really, this is what this is involving. The meaning is about in order to. And so we could say something like this: I held his arms in order to restrain him. Perhaps I'm a policeman or something like that, or a security guard, but I held his arms so as to restrain him is exactly the same. You could even say I held his arms to restrain him. We could just use a to plus infinitive and it would be very clear still that you mean so as to, in order to. Now, when we look at this negative sentence, it's using really this construction, but in both parts. We go to classes not so much to learn grammar as to practice speaking. So here we mean in order to learn grammar, in order to practice speaking. So it's really related to this expression. And please remember, when you make a comparison between X and Y ought to be in parallel. What I mean is that they ought to be both to plus infinitives, or both gerund expressions, or both noun phrases, or both adjective phrases. Whatever they are, they need to be both of the same element. And if you're unsure what I'm talking about, please go to my video on parallelism. I've got 5 lessons on parallelism, which speaks, I go into detail about how to make sure that your comparisons are parallel. Now, there's another way of comparing X and Y with this not so much X as Y. This is also correct, perfectly correct, and I hope you can see it's very different from this one. Applying these rules will improve not so much your grammar as your style. And here we're comparing X and Y. It's not like here where it's X is not so adjective as Y. It's not so much X as Y. So applying these rules will improve not so much your grammar as your style. This is actually very similar to just not X but Y. Very, very similar. For example, applying these rules will improve not your grammar but your style. Or applying these rules will improve not your grammar but rather your style. Okay, all of those would be correct. And I hope that shows you that this is really very, very different to this. Okay, so please remember this nice way of comparing, and please remember again, look, I've got your grammar and your style nice and balanced, nicely in parallel. It's something you always must remember with these comparisons. Now, number 3 isn't really a comparison. Look at my example. This is not so much a concern, as we are well prepared for the worst. I hope you can see, I hope that's really clear, that as is really like because in this sentence. It's not being used to compare two elements. We're just saying that this is not so much a concern because we are well prepared for the worst. So it's a different meaning here. Okay, there are many other negative comparisons that we could use. We've already looked at these two and applied them to this example, but we could also say no more X than Y. Yeah, he's no more interested than I am. And notice that I just get rid of the than I am interested. I take off the interested, and this is ellipsis, it's known as. It's when you omit words from a sentence. And again, this is in my parallelism course. Please watch the last 2 videos and you'll learn a little bit more about ellipsis and when it's possible and when you ought to use it. Really, you ought to always use it in comparisons, because then it keeps both elements balanced. Okay, neither X nor Y. I have neither the time nor the patience. Something like that. It's another way of comparing X and Y. Not only X, but also Y. He was not only angry, but also scared. Yeah. Don't forget, of course, you can invert it. We could put not only at the start and say not only was he angry, but also he was scared. And I would use the he was twice there, just because when you've got the elements on that side of the not only, they only apply to that one. And so I would repeat it on that side. If you don't know what I'm talking about, please watch the lessons on parallelism. Okay, and I have here a little bit of inversion as well to remind you that we can invert using these negative sentences. When we start with a negative adverbial, no sooner had I complained than I received a phone call. I made a complaint recently, and no sooner had I complained than I immediately received a phone call. And it just means they got straight back in touch with me. I was pleased to see that, but it's a shame that you have to complain first to get any action done. Okay, lastly, this can sometimes get confused with a lot of this, because we've got an as and a so. So I thought I'd mention it, even though it's not negative here. Basically, we can say just as X is true, so too Y is true. Yeah? Just as X is true, so Y is true. So just as X is so Y is so. So just as interest rates are rising, so too house prices are falling. And I've got it parallel, are rising, are falling. Or alternatively, just as you enjoy learning these grammatical nuances, so too do I. And I've taken off the I enjoy learning these grammatical nuances. I've just replaced it with an auxiliary verb do. That's ellipsis again. Please don't forget it whenever you're doing these, whenever you're making these comparisons. You see, it's very easy to mix up do and make. Okay, so if there are any questions about any of this, put them under the video. Relevant questions, as always. Yeah, I hope to make more videos about these kind of comparative structures. I'm going to try and use X and Y a lot more. I find it very useful for my own learning of these conjunctions, for my own study. Yeah, please put some questions under the video if you have any, and I hope to see you all soon.